Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is all about repurposing, recycling, DIYing, building. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that I did and incorporated it within my channel was sharing the creative process that I take when it comes to customizing certain pieces. And you'll see that later on within my channel. If you're interested in seeing how I turn this old console table into this super customized desk / workstation, keep watching. The first thing you're going to need is your lumber. The lumber that I'm using in this project came from an old, beat up, antique, full-sized bed frame. I decided to repurpose the bed rails for this project in particular because I didn't want the wood to go to waste, and I have another plan in mind to use the headboard and footboard. I found it at Habitat for Humanity for I think 15-20 bucks. Let's roll into the tools you're going to need. Apart from my Craig jig, I used a power drill. You can go with cordless, but all I had in hand was a corded drill. You're gonna need your measuring tape, a hammer, some glue, you'll see why later, and hardware. Hardware can be anything from the knobs you want, the type of legs you want. What I decided to do was use the old base from this old console table and use it as my main frame to build this table. I wanted to incorporate some old galvanized piping that I used in some old projects in my youngest son's nursery room, and found a pretty cool way to incorporate some storage into this blank canvas of a thought that I had. But I rolled with it. I also brought in some cardboard to protect my grass while I spray painted, a crowbar, some clamps. As you can see, I had a variety, some crud cutter so that I can clean using some gloves and a wool sponge, a square to take my measurements with a pencil, some spray paint, Minwax pre-stained wood conditioner, and some wax or some wood stain and things like that. And since we're going to be working with some wood that has been previously painted and we want to go right back down to bare bones, just wood, I got some paint remover, an old brush, disposable because I wasn't going to be keeping it after this project, and a tin bucket, and a screwdriver. The very first thing that I did here was remove the tabletop from its base, and I saved the wood because I was going to be using it later on in this project. At this point, I didn't quite know how, but I knew that I was going to. I then added 2 coats of some hammered black spray paint from Rust-Oleum, my favorite spray paint, by the way. Using some old wood that came from an old bed that had been painted multiple times, it required some work to get it to where I needed it to be so that I can start the project actually. If you get some lumber that is fresh from the hardware store, you can skip this whole step. I poured the paint stripper into this tin bucket as per the instructions. I brushed on a pretty thick coat. I think that almost immediately it started to work, started to bubble up. It saved me some time because normally I'd have to apply 1 to 2 coats, right? 2 usually. But this one, all I needed to do was apply 1 coat and the paint came off so easy. After removing all of the paint, this is what I was left with. Next step was to give it a really good cleaning. So I pulled out some crud cutter, gloves, and this old wool sponge and gave it a really thorough cleaning. I hosed it down in the backyard and let it dry overnight. This is what I was left with. Old wood on a metal based table. Keeping in mind that these are old bed rails, they still had the hardware that connects to the headboard and the footboard. So I needed to cut a few inches off on either end. I did a very light sanding here. I didn't want to take off the rest of the character left on here, so the only goal that I had on this step was just to get it down to a smooth surface. I then took a damp rag and just wiped down the rest of the debris. So let's talk about this wood conditioner product. First of all, you want to treat the wood like you do your hair or your skin. You have to keep it moisturized so that it doesn't crack and dry out. Same with this product. It prevents blotchiness from happening. It gives you more of a smoother feel and look at the end of your project. So wood conditioner is always step one for me, whether I'm refinishing a coffee table, a dining table, a random desk, or a couple of projects I already built for you I haven't shared yet. But wood conditioner is always my step one when working with wood. A little goes a long way when it comes to this product. You don't have to overcoat the wood by any means. I let that dry for its allotted time and then moved on to the paste finishing wax. I didn't want to stain this wood, I didn't want to paint it, I didn't want to do anything other than protect it and find another way to brighten the character that I unveiled after removing all that paint. The last step here was just to buff in the rest of the wax. It left a really smooth surface. I'm telling you, this is my go-to when I just want a natural wood rustic look. Condition and wax. Call it a day. I realized that the thickness just wasn't cutting it because it didn't cover the full surface of the tabletop like I wanted it to. But no worries, because I had some leftover wood that I'd previously taken off and it fit perfectly, so problem solved. I decided to use my Craig jig to pre-drill some pocket holes to ensure that I was building a pretty sturdy tabletop. I pre-drilled the pocket holes roughly 6 inches apart. I used this adjustable clamp that came with my Craig jig kit to help me make sure that I keep the wood pieces level to each other while I was drilling them in. Because the last thing I wanted after all the hard work I'd put in at this point was an uneven, unlevel surface. And also, you guys, don't be afraid to stand on the wood if it needs some added support or weight. I didn't have a lot of clamps to use at this point, so sometimes you gotta go with what you got. The measurement of this tabletop was by no way, shape, or form an even number or an even measurement, and it had like fractions and this and that. So getting it centered was a process. So I celebrated with a big hooray when I got it to where I needed it to be, and then used some clamps of various sizes, as you can tell, to help make sure that it was kept in place while I marked for my screws to go in. Okay, now we're working with the hardware. I was super excited to do this part because at this point, my vision is coming to life and I'd never seen a table like this before and I was going for it. Here's the gap that I mentioned earlier in the video. You can see it a little bit better from this angle, and then I did a little bit of a test run before I committed to screwing in the back flanges to the table bottom. There was a couple of nails sticking out with this one, and I took my time to remove every single nail left, and then repeated my previous steps. Remember the tabletop that I removed from it earlier? I used this template to make my measurements and mark it, then made my cuts. This is where it got a little bit tricky in trying to explain the process I took to make my measurements before drilling any holes. Each circle represents a phalange and the placement. I wanted the phalanges to be flushed into each corner. I would then be drilling a hole where the center would land so that I can fit each pipe into the hole so that I can screw the caps onto. Don't worry guys, this part's gonna make a little more sense later on. At this point, I was working with what was in my head and I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I managed to find a way to put pen to paper so that I can make it just a little bit more clear for y'all. I then marked my measurements from the end to the beginning of the phalange center. I marked all of my cuts, and then from here, all I needed to do was mark my center and begin the drill. I drilled the exact width of the pipe, not a bit thicker. It was all square, but it was a little too perfect. If I could go back and do it again, I would probably get a little bit of a thicker drill bit or hole saw, so that way when I tried to put my pipe through, it would go through and not have to be forced and hammered into place. This was as far as I was gonna get this wood into place, because the whole idea was put the pipe through and then screw the cap on. It wasn't as easy as I thought. So, Gorilla Glue to the rescue. I used this in a previous video on an old cabinet. This Gorilla Glue is bomb.com because, I mean, it holds and it holds really well. So I knew that I would be able to use it here and it would do what I needed it to do, which was just hold these caps into place. So, you ready for the after? Now my kid has the space to be the creative little human that he is. Alright, so for those of you who are new to my channel, I have been sharing the process that I'm taking to get my son's bedroom into order, basically. Just moved in a few months ago, and I'm slowly but surely getting this house into order, and my priority was my boys' bedrooms. So far, we've installed some wallpaper, I incorporated a DIY light fixture, built this desk, and there's still so much more to go. So if y'all want to follow along the process, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss a video. And as always, share some love, hit the like, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye!